covering a wacky traffic morning. Mary, I have bad news for you.
Bad news? What?
Turns out you've been mispronouncing your name for years. Amy VanDeVelde is in studio. What's the difference between VanDeVelde and VanDeVelde? Amy, why would you mispronounce it, or why would Mary mispronounce it?
Well, in Belgium, they say VanDeVelde. So Mary's correct in American, but my family chose to say VanDeVelde. Who knows why?
Yeah, you really are of the same ilk.
I think we are. When I visited Mary 20 years ago, I saw a picture of a man on her mantle, and I said, "Oh my God, Mary, that man's a VanDeVelde." And she's like, "That's my dad." Her dad looks uncannily like my grandfather, so we got to figure that out. But
twin sisters from different mothers? Could be.
Yeah, long-lost cousins. But, you know, some of my cousins do pronounce the E, I will say.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Well, look at me bringing cultures together.
It means from the field, by the way, too.
It does. We're just your standard farmers. Can't you see it in Mary and I?
Well, we're not here to talk about the farms, ladies. We're here to talk about technology. Now, you do a business in particular, Amy, which I think is terrific because you take folks that are technologically not savvy, but also might be afraid to even dive in and try it. Those are older folks, right?
Absolutely. I work for the OASIS Institute in St. Louis, and we've been pioneers in successful aging for 30 years. But my program, OASIS Connections, has been around since 2002. And initially, we were tasked with helping older adults bridge the digital divide. And the digital divide is, of course, the people who don't get online because of either age or fear of technology or lack of access.
To me, the cell phone's the gateway drug. It's like when you start using the cell phone, then you get a little more confidence technologically, then maybe you try one of them internets that are out there, and other things. Do you find that to be true?
Well, we're finding there's a huge adoption rate among people over 65 with tablets. And they also had flip phones, and they were fine with that, and that was easy enough for them to navigate. But now we're looking at how do they use tablets. So through my sponsorship, my program is sponsored by AT&T, and thank you AT&T for 10 years of sponsorship.
Absolutely.
We just did a series of Get Smart events throughout the country. We served about 1,000 people, and people were just wanting to come in with an AT&T mobility person from a store and get one-on-one coaching. The other thing we did was we took our own volunteers, and they also help people with technology. So people brought in their own devices, any device, doesn't have to be an AT&T device, and we coached them on the questions that they had on their own device. And it really helps to engage the people and help them understand the device they have.
Is there a borderline where you start to see here's where the technology, natural ability, or the craving for it falls off, and here's where people start to fight it? Because as you know, 60 isn't what 60 used to be. 70 isn't what 70 used to be. You can easily peel 10 years off of both those numbers. So at what age, I know it's different, but at what age, generally speaking, do people start to really need some technological goosing?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have a good answer for it. I haven't researched that thoroughly because it really depends on what your experience was with work.
Okay.
It really depends on your family situation. If you've got kids that are giving you devices, we're calling those hand-me-ups. You have access to technology. If you're in an underserved population and you have no access to Wi-Fi, you've got completely different barriers to getting your hands on technology, and you probably have to rely on public libraries, which is a lot of who I partner with to get a curriculum out to people. I have a curriculum of over 30 classes, including mobile devices, that allow people to learn the technology wherever a computer lab exists.
So do people get, a goose to do this because they want to Skype with their grandkids, family connections, or just because they feel like they're getting left behind?
All of those things.
Okay.
People have different motivations, but a huge one, of course, is to see someone's pictures on Facebook, particularly grandchildren, or to text their grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who don't have technology and may have lost a job, it's really important to up their job skills because the jobless rate for people over 50 is higher than it's ever been, and people over 50 are perceived as very expensive, and they're easy to be let go from the workforce sometimes, unfortunately.
My finding, too, has been with people like my mom. My mom's very hip young woman.
Mm-hmm.
She's 24. But she has this phobia to some extent about technology. She's much more technologically savvy than she thinks she is. Mm-hmm. And I do think people freeze up and they feel intimidated sometimes around people who are not open about teaching like you are. Because if you feel stupid, if you feel like it's something you should know and everybody else knows, the last thing you need is one of them punk kids to come along and make you feel even dumber.
Absolutely. And so that what you're talking about is the difference between a digital native, which is somebody who grew up with technology in their hands, and a digital immigrant. Digital immigrants want to sit back and they're eager to learn, but they don't want to say the right thing because they have such vast life experience and knowledge. And a lot of times your digital native will be like, well, you just do this and you just... Well, it's not.
Yeah, how come you don't get it?
Right.
Yeah, that whole thing.
And so often we find that people learn better from people that aren't in their family, that going to a public library, going to your senior center, going to your community center, anywhere there's Wi-Fi, my classes can be implemented.
Yeah, and grandparents, if you feel like you're not getting appropriate treatment by the people teaching you, you should certainly look into this. But I would also suggest as a possible comeback, I don't know why I don't get the internet. Maybe you could tell me why you're still living on my couch. Something about not having a job. We all have things we do better than others in some way, shape, or form. All right, so if people want more information on what you do, because I love what you do, how do they find that out?
Well, we're at oasisnet.org/connections.
oasisnet.org.
Yep.
/connections. And if that sounded like Korean to you,
you can Google OASIS Connections.
Or have your favorite 7-year-old do it for you.
Yeah, well, that's another method.
So I appreciate you coming in. Can we use you again?
I would love
call you
to
on the
come
phone.
back.
Yeah,
That sounds great.
It's Mary VanDeVelde and her friend Amy VanDeVelde teaming up. The VanDeVeldes taking over the show.